Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome, Barbora, first of all. So my name is Pietro Manzoni. I'm from Polytechnic University of Valencia in Spain, and I'll be hosting this seventh session of the Connect Them All series of talks. So today's guest is Barbora Buhnova. Welcome, Barbora.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. And so as you, I don't know if this is your first talk that you're watching. So the idea of this series of talks is to present various topics related to connectivity and Internet of Things. So today's talk by Barbora is titled Trust Management in Social Internet of Things. And let me just say a few words about Barbora. If I mispronounce some name, just let me know. So Barbora, she's an associate professor and vice dean at Masaryk University Faculty of Informatics in Brno, Czech Republic. She leads multiple research teams at the Faculty of Informatics and at the Czech Cybercrime Center of Excellence, with special emphasis on trust management in autonomous ecosystems. She's a steering committee member of the International Conference of Software Architecture and has been involved in organization of various leading conferences. Beside her academic activities, she's the chair of the Association of Industrial Partners and at her faculty. And she's a co-founding and governing board member of Chiquitas, a non-profit organization aiming at making IT skills more accessible to youth and women. Okay, so hope I said everything correctly. And okay, Barbora, whenever you're ready, thanks again for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the kind invitation, and it's great to be here. I'll be happy to share a topic that is nowadays very highly discussed in the community of connectivity. I linked it. It's basically like when you look at the title, it is a link of two big keywords. One is trust management, and one is social Internet of Things. Yeah, in terms of the social Internet of Things, we will discuss what it is. It's basically following the advancement of the digitalization, where the individual digital entities, or let's say machines of things, actually starting forming something that resembles societies in a sense. And so I would like to introduce you to it. So when we speak about social Internet of Things, we don't speak about like a human and the IoT, but we're really speaking about the things becoming social. And social means forming friendships and coalitions and working together and deciding who is my friend and who isn't my friend, without actually thinking about human at this point. So it's a very, very interesting concept. And then the topic of trust management is extremely interesting. And now, like I would say, it will soon like be having big hype in like penetrating the community of IoT and not only IoT. So let's take a look at these things. We started with a bit of introduction, so I will maybe jump on that. In terms of where I'm coming from Masaryk University, and it's in Czech Republic. It's the second largest university we have in the Czech Republic. It's in the city of Brno, so it's not in the capital in Prague. It's very nice. It's a very innovative university. So it was the first university that had its independent faculty of computer science, and that's where I'm sitting now. So that's my place, my affiliation. And within the building, we also like have a lot of focus on cybersecurity, and we run this Czech Cybercrime Center of Excellence right in our building, and actually next building. What is interesting about this is that we are really looking into the multidisciplinary challenges of making the digital technology well fit for the future in which our societies are heading. And that actually means also more and more humans feeling quite vulnerable, understanding that digitalization will be taking over the environments where we were used to be the ones who control the things. And that is like having the link to IoT, right? Because we're actually touching and interconnecting that like physical and digital space, and we are really like interfering with the space where human was used to be the one who is in control, and now with those devices becoming also more mobile, we are speaking about Internet of Vehicles, for example. These are becoming a little scary for the humans that feel really vulnerable in the presence of something that can autonomously interfere with the human. And yet, like we know that humans are pretty vulnerable also physically in the presence of this kind of technology. So like what we are trying to do is that we look into the challenging questions, and we have also lawyers in the teams, so we have people from social sciences in the teams, so really having a lot of fun in that direction. Let me say from which direction I'm coming personally. So I'm coming from the software engineering direction. So I am bringing the software engineering perspective, namely the software architecture. We just discussed that this is my community, the software architecture community. Within software architecture, we actually, like for long, we're really focused on the systems and thinking, okay, like how can I architect my system the best way I can? But soon we understood that we can't really keep our focus on the system alone, because our system does not work as a standalone entity. Our system will need other systems to cooperate with, right? Also, if we look at a single system, the infrastructure around the system needs to be pretty complex. And not all of it is under my control. So the software architecture community actually started moving towards understanding that architectures are actually much more complex than just looking at one single system and being enclosed in that bubble. And moreover, we started to understand that like parts of that system are not really there for life. They come and go, right? They are like parts of that architecture, the services I can connect and disconnect, and things are becoming more and more complex. And so like we as a software architecture community, we like those challenges, and we like to look into the kinds of architectures that have interesting like cybersecurity and like cybercrime challenges. And so like IoT is inevitably a beautiful playground for software architecture research. So let's go a little deeper into the motivation. So like we see the digitalization advancing, we see that the kinds of systems and we are like touching the IoT are actually like really interfering all different spaces where we are basically facing the thing that we call in technology dual use dilemma. The technology is progressing faster than we are often cognitively able to capture. Are we going in the wrong direction, or are we going too fast? So the dual use dilemma is about basically the better the technology gets to help us as a society, the more dangerous it gets to actually harm us as a society. So the better we get, the more protection we need. Why it's challenging nowadays more than it used to be, namely because of the infrastructures you see in the IoT context. So basically, the world is becoming hyper-connected. The hyperconnectivity is dangerous also from the point of view of the remote control, right? You can remote control something, a train, for example. Then the uncertainty, because we have many connected devices and we don't know how much we can trust the individual devices. Then also the thing that the individual entities are becoming more and more complex, right? Initially, when we played with IoT, we're thinking about very simplistic devices. But these devices are becoming more and more complex. They are getting more and more like independent ability to make decisions, to adapt to their environment. And with the like rise of AI and autonomy of different devices, this is becoming quite scary sometimes, especially if we don't know like if we can trust that individual device. And then, of course, we are now building infrastructures that will need to be able to protect itself against threats that are not existing yet. So in our software engineering community, we call it engineering for the unknown. So really, like, we are engineering the system now, but we don't know what we are protecting it against. We don't understand that yet, and yet we need to protect it. Or I would say built-in mechanisms. It will help the system to protect itself from those who shouldn't be trusted, right? And so I'm using the word trust a couple of times, so we'll get there. Why is this so critical? It's also that digitalization is meeting critical infrastructures. For long, we had these different digital play fields separated from the critical infrastructure. What is a critical infrastructure? These are the infrastructures that lives of peoples and well-being of the whole countries are relying upon. So the failure could have a cascading effect with like really dire consequences on not only economy but lives of the people. So when you look at the domains, so what are the critical infrastructures? These are the domains. So it's the energy sector, it's the water, it's the food and agriculture, food production, is the healthcare, things about public order and safety, transportation, industrial production, civil administration, the space, environment, or defense or military. And these are strikingly similar to the domains of IoT. So when you really think about like how we cluster the individual domains for IoT applications, you would actually arrive to a very similar picture to what is being classified by different standardization schemes as critical infrastructure. So we see that there is this like penetration of technology into things that are really critical for us. Now, let's now jump into that social, like what do we mean with social Internet of Things? So it's basically, we want to employ higher intelligence into these different infrastructures, like IoT systems, but we know that each individual agent is quite limited, right? It has like limited capabilities, it has limited like maybe access to power, etc. And so what is the smart way to achieve high intelligence is to find collaborators. And so basically find friends, have them to access different services that I'm not able to get access to myself, or increase that like higher intelligence. Of course, like this is great, and like these different like coalitions are wonderful. But what can start happening is there needs to be some kind of like ability to make decisions, independent decisions, some ability to have a goal and be able to actually find collaborators for your goals. Then also to understand who is my friend and not my friend. Maybe when making a decision to ask for peer opinion and then make a decision based on the peers I trust. And what we understand from like this layout is that these devices basically start forming societies. And that's why they are called social Internet of Things. So social Internet of Things is a thing. It is defined in research and literature exactly in that way. So it's basically a setup in which these different things within my IoT infrastructure are starting searching for like coalitions and partners and forming friendships. And this is all driven by trust. So basically understanding who I cannot trust. So trust management becomes a thing. Now, what are the examples of this social IoT? So we typically, like when we speak about the main examples of like the social IoT, we don't really focus on the very simple things in this as IoT. We focus on things that are becoming more intelligent. So while in IoT domains, like one basic classification that I can pull up is healthcare, energy, transportation, building automation, smart cities, agriculture, industry, and military. And as IoT, I would say most research being done now and like most discussions happening are in transportation and healthcare. In terms of transportation, I would say that's the biggest one. So we have a lot of discussion now and these like bigger things which are mobile. So these are different kinds of vehicles. And then in healthcare, we are talking a lot about medical Internet of Things. So basically different medical devices being interconnected together. Now the motivation might be different. Like in healthcare, the motivation for trust is that I must really know that I get the correct information, and if there is an intruder, I can detect that intruder and basically take action so that I disregard the input. In terms of transportation, it's even more interesting because in transportation and different like step domains of, for example, IOV, so Internet of Vehicles, we see now a lot of research going towards autonomy. And you don't need to think about it just as a far future, because when we think about autonomy, it's basically we have certain type of autonomy in all vehicles we are buying today, right? Like it's not full autonomy, but there is some level of autonomy, and therefore it is start becoming a little scary in terms of the intelligence that this is basically controlling this kind of autonomy. To understand, may I trust that intelligence? So it's not only that there is an entity that joins an ecosystem and is trying to be harmful to others, but it's also an entity that can like appear to work correctly and is coming from a trusted provider, and yet its kind of intelligence is making moves that are weird, right? Maybe it is trying to optimize something in a way that it's harming or discriminating, etc. So these domains, I would say, are now under like most of interest of the scientific community because there is something to it, right? Like that makes it interesting. Now, for the scenarios I will be discussing in the talk and I will be showing you, I will stay within that transportation because it's very easy to demonstrate trust on transportation. However, whenever I'm speaking about two vehicles, trusting each other, you can imagine any kind of things, right? In the IoT context, it's just like vehicles are quite nice to demonstrate things with. Okay, and we also say like as we have on the slide, what are the kinds of Internet of Vehicles that we see the social Internet of Things being discussed? It's basically three, depending on where these vehicles are operating. The first is vehicular ad hoc networks, VANET, and it's on road traffic, also basically cars, buses, etc. The second is flying ad hoc networks, which are basically drones or UAVs, which is unmanned aerial vehicles. And then the third one, very interesting now, again, like very, I would say like this one will grow in the next decade, is acoustic sensor networks for underwater vehicles. So we call them underwater drones or UUVs, like unmanned underwater vehicles. And you can see numerous applications of these, especially for autonomy, because they typically operate in spaces where remote control is already becoming quite difficult. And often they are also like patrolling different infrastructures underwater, or drones are patrolling infrastructures, for example, like construction sites, etc. So like there are many interesting applications that are now being discussed. Okay, so some of these scenarios, just to take a look at them. So when I take a look at the road, and this is very simple. I have a highway, very like limited scope, and yet you can imagine many scenarios where trust between those individual vehicles is quite a challenge to address. So one thing is coordinated information exchange and coordinated moves. So when one vehicle wants to overtake another vehicle, they actually need to exchange some information. When they don't need to, but like in the future, we expect them to communicate instead of using a camera and trying to say, oh, this might be a car, this might be going in that speed. So like when we think about research, we are thinking about like where we are heading and how we are ready for that kind of future. So in that picture of the future where we are heading, the vehicles can exchange information, and one vehicle can say, hey, I will be going in this speed, or one vehicle can be saying, hey, I want to overtake you. Could you please keep your speed steady and not increase your speed now before I finish the maneuver? So there is some exchange, and I would like to know, can I trust that information, right? Um, Next example can be really collision avoidance with misbehaving vehicles. So some vehicles might be misbehaving, and it would be good to understand like there is a misbehaving vehicle in the highway. So the trust can then like help others to protect themselves, right? Another quite discussed example and quite used in many works is that we will build autonomy for higher sustainability. And in higher sustainability, it is effective that autonomous cars drive in a platoon so that they reduce air friction and can save some fuel. So they reduce the fuel consumption. And then within that platoon, they can actually decide, do we allow a vehicle to join the platoon, or we don't trust it and don't allow it to join the platoon? Because if there is a vehicle inside the platoon and jumps on the brakes, it becomes really dangerous, right, for all the passengers in the cars in the platoon. Uh, and then like one scenario that I'm using with my software engineering community, so maybe there are some of you who are into software engineering community, even if you have that car, and actually for any IoT device in the future, we would like to imagine those devices to be able to have the capability to be updated, right? We actually had a talk in this series about sustainability, and that was one of the main messages, right? That we want to build those things, those devices, so that we can update it. Now, this trust question is like, shall that thing or device trust the update? In the past, or I would say still in the current present moment, when an update is coming, how do I decide if I trust that update? I typically only ask, is it coming from a reliable source, right? Is it like coming from the certified provider? Is it coming from my own production producer, right? As a car. But if you think about like how much dynamism we have at the moment, it is actually not a very robust strategy to trust everything that is coming from a certified or trusted provider. Namely, I don't know if you know the statistics, 44% of technological companies have insider attackers among their employees. That's interesting. 44% is quite a high number. Most of those attackers do not really want to cause harm. Many of them are doing insider attacks from boredom or because they just want to find a shortcut, for example, to get access to data, not asking a third party for permission to get that data. So it's not always for harmful reasons, but it's just good to understand that, okay, if we have so many people, and we can think about critical infrastructures that the whole countries are dependent on them. Isn't it realistic that there can be a sabotage from the inside of a trusted provider to actually inject the problem in an update that is then downloaded towards that thing, device, or vehicle, and then hijack the operations, right? So again, like in the future where we are heading, we would really like to take these things seriously, because when you think about it, and that's like one thing that I would like you to take away from this talk, when you think about the current setup as we have it, and you think, okay, so we have certification, but besides certification, we basically have a full trust paradigm. We don't really question the trust, right? Like who I cannot trust. We just, communicate, take an input, and then use it and work with it. So couldn't we do this like a better way?
Let me just, Barbara, sorry to interrupt, but just I received a question, and I think it's related to what you said before about, the 45% of people in companies that are unreliable. So the question they propose is, okay, we are talking about devices. What about the impact of AI in IoT devices? So if IoT devices become unstable or they take different decisions because they have specific algorithm inside them that can make new decision, can take new decision.
Absolutely. And I would say this is one of the main motivations that was driving the trust research. Because often, and this is the last scenario, I didn't discuss it, but like I will go to it. Just imagine like a scenario of human to vehicle trust. You have a human sitting in an autonomous driving vehicle, and now the vehicle starts speeding up. How does the human know if the car is so intelligent by the, like AI it's using, that now it's the safest move is to speed up? Or the human should take over the driving because it looks weird to speed up without the human seeing any adequate reason for it, right? So we see that kind of thing, that a human is sitting in the car starts doing something unpredictable, and we don't really know, is it that intelligence that is higher than the human intelligence because the sensors see or sense things that the human cannot really detect? Or is it that there might be some problem in the algorithm, that might be some problem in the optimization that the car is trying to do, and is actually becoming unsafe for the human inside? And of course, like now the situations we are facing might look quite easy for the human to take that decision, but in the future it's not really trivial. So couldn't we like have a better way of understanding, can I trust this move to speed up, or is it just higher intelligence that I as a human do not really have capabilities to adequately cluster into good or bad? So absolutely, the AI is one of the big drivers for research in trust. Um, okay, cool. So, and this is, I showed you a picture of a highway. That's the simplest um, landscape ever, right? Like just imagine the city, right? Like what happens there? Because what happens there is interaction with people who are vulnerable, and with the people. For example, what you would see here is a person crossing a red light. Right, these are the things that we can do. And so what, for example, this car could do is to warn other cars and saying, hey, behind me is a person crossing a red light, just be careful, right? But shall those other cars trust it or not? Like so really the possible scenarios are endless. Okay, now what I want to say, many people confuse trust and trustworthiness. So often when people say trust, people imagine, okay, so trust is about, is it trustworthy or not? And that's about it. But I want to here explain that trust is not about trustworthiness because of the angle or point of view. Trustworthiness is about the system I'm looking at. So when you imagine that I'm building a system, when I'm trying to make it trustworthy, I'm focusing on that system and I'm trying to make it reliable and secure, etc. So these are the quality criteria. But when I'm speaking about trust, then I'm not in that scope of that system. I'm outside of it. I'm looking at it and I'm asking, shall I trust it or not? And now, shall I trust it is not only based on, do I believe it's trustworthy? It's about other things. For example, how vulnerable I am if I misjudge my trust, right? Because when you think about like who we shall learn about trust from, it's societies. Like if we speak about social Internet of Things, look at human societies, right? When you have two humans, and I, for example, use one example. Imagine walking on the street during the night, and you see a stranger who is just approaching you on the same pavement, let's say. So your level of trust is not really based on like analyzing their trustworthiness, because you can't really tell how trustworthy they are. But what you're thinking about is mainly how vulnerable I feel, right? Like if I misjudge, so if I trust and it was a bad decision, like will I be compensated? Like will the kind of harm that might happen to me be possible to reverse or not? Which is difficult when I pay with a credit card somewhere and I know that the bank will give me my money back. I'm likely to give my card even if that is a vulnerable thing, but I believe that there are reparation mechanisms, right? So just I want to say trust is a different thing than trustworthiness. And let me say, in the technical community, we really don't know how to work with it. So let's take a look at it and take it as a more like stimulational food for thought. Yeah, and of course, like when you look at human societies, why we develop trust, why human societies develop trust, it's basically to protect itself against malicious intruders, right? So if you imagine like a little village, then when a new person enters that village, then they don't have much trust. They have some baseline trust, right, of the population of that village. But over time, each interaction will help them build up certain reputation within that village. And actually, that will help them to gain trust of the community if they behave well. At the same time, it's difficult to gain trust and it's easy to lose it. So if that person like do something harmful, they can lose the trust very quickly. That they can be then rebuilding for another year, right? So these are interesting mechanisms. So like what we can learn from it, and could it be any useful for us when working with trust? Okay, so one thing is that this is the example actually with a stranger entering a village. What is interesting about it? It's that trust is not really just a binary thing in terms of one agent looking at the other and deciding in that time and moment, shall I trust it? It is actually a collaborative effort. So the whole village is part of helping that stranger to gain the trust of the community. And this is also a way to actually go if we want to have a robust solution for the future. So if you really imagine that you have an autonomous drone that is programmed to harm, or you have an autonomous driving car that was hijacked and is entering a city with the intent to harm, how shall we protect against it? And I will tell you at the moment, nobody has any clue of a potential solution. We just feel vulnerable in that case to imagine that the car enters a city with a plan to harm, but we don't really have a solution. So what we can learn about trust is that the whole community can engage, so that they basically notice, like other cars notice this car and say, there is something weird about this car. And what happens then is not that you would call police and take this car off, but you increase the supervision over that part, right? And that's also what those human societies are doing. So when you think, oh, this stranger is behaving strange, what you start doing is not that you will expel the stranger out of the city, but you start being more cautious in their presence. Maybe you don't disclose that much information. So again, like based on the level of trust of certain entity, this can limit the interaction they have with the rest, right? So for example, when I'm making a coordinated move and I'm asking you, I will not trust fully that information if you have a bad reputation, right? So these are the things that, again, they are very intuitive in human societies, and it's striking and surprising that we have not yet built it in those social Internet of Things properly. Okay, so I also like to
Just a question. So because I'm relating this with like you talk about intrusion detection. I work a very little in regular networks about intrusion detections. And the problem there is that sometimes the intruder takes months to produce the attack. And so I was thinking, okay, I'm on a highway, I'm going, to Madrid, and
Absolutely.
I don't go to Madrid very often, so I don't have time to collect that much information because everything is so quick. So time, I think, it's also a critical point in this type of system. No? I mean, in gaining trust or defining trust among different actors.
Yes, so what I would say, this is absolutely true, and this is absolutely true. At the same time, already noticing that there is something weird, even if that element might be okay, is something that also, like, imagine the scenarios again. Like, I will use these human scenarios. It's like very easy for us, and it's actually fun to remember. When somebody wants to do a robbery, right, to come into a bank and conduct a robbery, of course they will try to look as normal as possible, right? They will not take a gun far from the entrance of the place, etc. So they will do their best to look as unsuspicious as possible. That's what also humans do. But maybe before they enter the building, they will look right and left. These little things that might be unsuspicious, but already if we were able to, have some alert, then a guard in that bank would notice and follow them.
Okay.
Right? So, and the thing that the guard is following them doesn't mean that the guard will start asking them to leave or searching for a gun or whatever, right? Like, what the guard will do is that they will notice them. Because they did this like weird look right and left before entering the bank. So there are actually signals. And sometimes even we humans are not able to say why this person looks weird to me, right? But there are signals. And we are using also deep learning for the ability to classify, right? Is this suspicious behavior or not? Because we are not able to tell very well, like, what is the suspicious behavior like looking like, but we can learn how the suspicious behavior can look like. This is first thing. The second thing is also, if somebody takes half a year of unsuspicious behavior before they do something bad, it's already quite safe for us, comparing to the situation when they enter the city and do as much harm as possible within one day, right? So even like letting that car do one harm and then stop it is a progress, right? So let's say that, like let's yeah. So okay. Another analogy that I like to use to make things more memorable for people is learning from biology, right? So I sometimes call these ecosystems immune response ecosystems. So really, immune response is about like how my cells are detecting that there is a problem. They are able to spot that there is a virus and then like isolate that virus. So it's basically the techniques are then similar, like finding out what is weird and then isolating it properly. And trust can be of help in here. Okay, so some aspects about trust, because we are speaking around it, but we didn't really define it. So trust can be defined different ways, like in different domains. But what is important, and I like use this definition for the context of IoT or the automation and connectivity, is that you basically imagine that you have a truster. This is me, and this is trustee. So this is that unknown, right? And I want to decide myself, shall I trust or not? In that, we say that it's the attitude or belief of the truster to achieve a specific goal in interaction with the trustee under uncertainty and vulnerability. So I I do not need to trust if there is no uncertainty and there is no vulnerability. But these are the two like critical things in the definition. So whenever there is some uncertainty and there is vulnerability of the truster, there is a reason to actually have a way to decide, do I trust the trustee? And we can go deeper now. So what is interesting about trust, about that belief, it's like it's subjective because I have a trust goal, right? Just for your example. So imagine that like, okay, if I want to just do a coordinated move, so I want to ask about some information, but this information is not crucial to me. So for example, I want to ask the car I'm overtaking, will you keep your speed or not? But I know that even if they are lying to me, I have other ways to protect myself. So it's not really critical. The trust goal might not be that critical, but there may be some more critical scenarios. So, you know, information exchange might be one trust goal. Shall I trust that information? But there are others where, for example, some vehicle is facing me and I really need to know, shall I protect myself or not? So there are different things that will influence my decision whether I trust. Okay, what is interesting about trust is asymmetric. If I trust you, that says nothing about whether you trust me, but it has certain transitive property that, like, if I trust somebody, they become my friend, and that my friend trusts somebody, I'm more likely to develop trust. So it has certain transitive properties. Now there are different schemes, so the research communities are looking into like a local and global, because I was speaking about I interact with somebody and I'm thinking, okay, are they dangerous or not? So I'm, for example, passing a stranger on the street. But then it may be similar when I sit in a Uber, right? So I call a Uber, I sit in a Uber, even if that driver behaves strange, but I know that they have very good rating, I might have a tendency to trust because they have a global reputation combined with my current experience. So we actually also, as humans, we always combine the global and local. And so this is a picture that that I like to use to explain what is influencing trust. And now we think about it in terms of like how the trust framework could look like. So when I have the truster and that interacts with the trustee, it's basically to judge how trustworthy they are. Then they interact with them, and that interaction is feeding their experience. That experience is that local trust. We call it direct trust. And it's actually important not only what my present experience is, but also what my past experience is, right? Because I typically care about if I had a good experience with you previously and now you are behaving strange, maybe it's just like a dust on the sensor, but you know, like it's not really something that I need to be careful about you being malicious in some way. And then there is this global thing. We call it indirect trust. The global thing is coming from two sources typically. Again, this is like collection from different like peer-reviewed studies where you combine the knowledge in one picture. And this is that I care about the global reputation. And it's important that there is like a trusted entity or authority that manages the reputation model. That's the Uber stars, right? Rating. And then it's the peer opinion. And we as humans actually consult the peer opinion a lot, right? So also when you think about trust in terms of, I don't know, you enter a place and you look around, and when you see that everybody is calm, you become more calm than if you enter a place that looks weird, you look around and everybody panics, then you start panicking as well, right? So we even, like for the peer opinion, we use different peer groups. So for example, you consult different peer group depending again what your goal is, what you want to do. So we consult and take peer opinion into account. And then there is context. So there is the vulnerability and the reparability we talked about, and they all enter the trust decision. Of course, any experience from the direct interaction feeds the updates of the peer opinion, of the reputation for the future interactions. So that's the basic picture. And what is interesting is that, like, how do I judge that experience, right? And there is very interesting research that is looking into two kinds of metrics, and it's quality of service metrics and the social metrics. And now you might think, okay, the quality of service metrics, okay, so when I have two IoT devices, I can judge, okay, so the quality of service metrics is the latency or how reliable it is, right? So I can judge, oh, this looks off or this looks broken. But what is the social metrics? And social metrics are interesting because they are about like integrity and benevolence and honesty, friendship, openness. And you might think, okay, but like, how do I judge these kind of things in a device? How honest or how we have like honesty and like openness, etc. And this actually is possible. So no, just stop me anytime, so that like if we wanted to have some time for final question, we have it. But like I will give you a few insights in the remaining time before you stop me. So two nice examples are actually the honesty and openness. So just imagine that you walk on the street and you see the stranger passing by who is walking a little like wobbly, right? So what I do as a human is that I actually create a predictive model of their behavior, and I do some compliance checking. And if my prediction is that like they should be working straight and they are not, I will see misalignment with my prediction and not trust, right? But if that person told me, hey, I'm disabled, so I will work this way because of my disability, then my prediction model will be that they walk as a disabled person. I match it to, like I match that behavior and I see, oh, that matches, so that's fine. So it is interesting that like what we, for example, use in our research for this is using digital twins. I can ask this device, could you disclose actually your declared behavior? And I can use it to check, are you consistent with your declared behavior? And this way, this is a social metrics, because I check first how open you are, because the more open others are, the more we are open to trust them, right? And that's the same with humans. Openness promotes trust. But the second, it's the honesty and is the consistency. So are they consistent with what they declared? Again, consistency promotes trust. So these are the examples of social metrics, and you can use an exchange of declared behavior in terms of digital twins. So these are interesting strategies, and we actually use them even in scenarios like, for example, the update scenario. I can actually, like, we have one research now being done about the car sandboxing the update and basically doing predictive simulation of that update to understand what it is about to do. So I ask for its digital twin, even if the update is digital itself. And I'm really trying to judge what it is going to do and how consistent it is with the declared behavior. Similar, you can imagine this like think-to-think trust. So there can be really like exchange of like what you are about to do, and then making sure that the action is consistent. So yeah, and then it kind of like I will just skip through this real quick. It's interesting then to make some decisions like how to protect myself if I don't really trust, right? Because if I know I don't trust you, it doesn't yet mean that I can keep myself safe. So like, what shall I do and how to ensure safety? I'll jump through it and maybe just go through.
Yes, if you want to have a couple of questions, if you want.
Let's do it, and then I will just
Sure.
wrap up with the challenges of this domain.
Yeah, so one of the question is, okay, trust management appears to be something complex. Can this be implemented on smaller IoT devices with limited resources? This is one question. Clearly, because you're supposing kind of devices are talking to each other and kind of,
Absolutely,
humans. So,
absolutely.
but what if it's simple sensors?
Yes,
Simple sensors that get crazy and start sending continuously or something like that. So, if you can comment
yes.
on this.
Yeah, so at the moment, there is quite a body of research on trust in, for example, sensor networks, where you have like super simplistic devices that have so small battery that like you actually are ready to, basically disregard some of those sensors in the sensor networks. So if you were interested in like how trust is being dealt with in like a very simple devices, there is a nice body of research in these sensor networks, because that was a domain for quite some time. People were researching it because they wanted to know like should I use this device to like pass my communication through, or shall I skip it and find a different way, right? Find a different route. So basically, there the implementation is then like deciding like what to skip, and it's like the decisions are much simpler, but they are easier to implement. Then there are little more advanced schemes which are happening in conditions like underwater, where you are also having often this like sensor networks and communication, but often the thing that something does not respond really, or like is going crazy, might only mean that the water is blurred, and I shall retry quite often. So these are a little more complex schemes where my trust is about like understanding that it might not be the fault of that device, but fault of the conditions, that they appear untrusted. So then you can look into that research. In research in my team specifically, we are really looking into those complex social Internet of Things, where, as I said, we are often looking into Internet of Vehicles and Internet of Medical Things. And in those, you typically have some intelligence inside of them. So it really depends. I would say you can scale the way you manage trust to how intelligent the devices are.
Okay, thanks a lot. So a few questions more. So yes, you talked about the update scenario, the one of the problem. How can we be assured about consistency?
Yeah.
Um,
So. Mhm.
yeah, no, that's a basic question.
Yes. So for the consistency, it again depends consistency of what. I'm not 100% sure. So
Well, I don't know the question. I think it consistently means that what if the update is complete, or once the update is complete, is trustable, or something like that. I think that there is no more information. Maybe the one that asked the question could send more information.
yeah.
Maybe another question. Decide to trust a device based on current interaction. Would it make a difference if it is if it is an intentional attack or faulty devices that leads to a weird behavior? So how can you distinguish between a weird behavior and actually an attack?
Yes, yes. So we call it intentional and unintentional. So indeed, there is this important distinction. The reason why this distinction is important is that if it is intentional, and so there is an attack, you prefer to actually prepare your safety like escape strategy in a sense, without the trustee noticing, right? Because that's the same with the update scenario. So like we have this kind of research. We also actually have some collaboration with one automotive company on it, where we are working with that update and we are sandboxing the update, right? But if that update knows that it's a sandboxed and like it wants to cause harm, of course it will behave good as long as it understands that it's being sandboxed. right? And once it's released to control the driving function, it will start behaving bad. So indeed, it is important to find a distinction of the malicious and faulty, so that you can protect your information about, like you can actually prevent it from understanding certain things about the system. So there are some ways in which, we are trying to make a distinction, but they are highly context and problem relevant. So there is no universal way I would be aware of. But when like when you work in a car, you have certain ways that you can touch upon. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me make it simple, because I could go into too much detail.
Yeah, no, I know. This, but again, the idea of this talk is clearly to give an overview and give an overview. Just last question, then I'll leave you to wrap up your talk. So, how did you select the criteria, and how do you evaluate it? So, I think basically when you want to trust something, I think it's very specific on each context has its own. You have to define its own rule specific to that scenario to understand what is trustable and what is not trustable. No?
Yeah. So basically, the criteria to a large degree are about those different metrics. So about the social metrics and about the quality of service metrics that we want to evaluate. In that evaluation, it's a big body of open research. So really, for the social metrics, very little can be found. The community is now working on it. It's an extensive research, and it's quite exciting. But we do not really have an answer yet. So I would say, like now, it is very vivid, like the research around it. So you really see a spike in trust-related work popping up. So it's actually a space for you, all of you watching this, to think about, like, what would be a viable trust metric to judge or to see. One thing that we are basically, for example, using that is simple to use is really like using the different deep learning classification to understand that something is off, because we are trying to mimic like how we do it as humans. But I would say that there is a lot of landscape to uncover. So yeah, a lot of open research opportunities.
Okay, so well, I think we are right on time. We always try to keep these talks around 1 hour. Well, thanks a lot, Barbora. I think
Yes.
it was a very interesting talk, very interesting area. I know that it's very active. I'm not actually working on it, but I think it's a very it's fundamental, because at the end, if the IoT will grow and we will have what they usually say, millions of devices talking to each other. So we will have to build some trust mechanism to.
Exactly. And the important thing in here is that it's actually, the smarter the devices will become, the better they will be in masking that they are untrusted. So for example, we see different trust attacks that they will fool a coalition that will then trust it and will actually, increase its reputation because they hijacked the trust, right? It's what's happening in our societies, right? We have so polarized society where some people trust that the earth is flat because they are a coalition, because they are a community, right? So these are like very interesting challenges as well. Like, and it would be one of the challenges, like how to deal with the intelligence to actually hide and polarizing that trust coalitions.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks a lot. Thanks again. Thanks to all of you that attended to this session. Just please check the upcoming talks. Just the next one will be the 1st of June. Binke Gitzman, one of the founders of the Think Networks, Barbora, will talk about their initiative and their future plans. So thanks again, Barbora, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.